And welcome back to Backspace Academy. In this lab on IAM, we're going to run through some of the main features of IAM. We'll create a user, we'll create a group, and we'll add that user to that group. We'll create a password policy. We'll set up an IAM role for EC2 instances. We'll create an account alias, which will make life easier for us to log into our account. And finally, we'll create a credentials report, which will list all of the credentials that we've got for this account and the activity of those. Okay, so we start off at Services and IAM. And we go to Users. Now we want to add a user. We'll give that user a name. And we're going to give this user both programmatic access, and programmatic access means that they can use the command line interface or the software development kits with an access key and a secret access key. And we're also going to give this person console access as well, so they can log into the management console. We'll use an auto-generated password, and we'll require that they have a password reset when they first log in. Click on Next Permissions. Now, because we're going to be creating a group which will have those permissions, and when this user will be added to that group, they will inherit the permissions of the group. So we don't need to define the permissions at the user level. So we're just going to click on Next Review. And we can see there that we've got the username as test user, and they've got both programmatic and console access. Auto-generated password, and they require a password reset, and they've also got permission to change their own user password, because by default they don't have that, but because we selected the option that they have to change their password, then that automatically attaches that policy for us. So we click on Create User. Okay, so the user has now been created. So what we've got now are the credentials for the user. So the user's name is test user. Now for programmatic access and for command line interface access, we need the access key ID and the secret access key, which is what we've got there. And then we've got the password, which is what we use combined with the username to log into the console. So we can send an email to someone with that, or we can download those credentials here as well. And so if we download this CSV, but we need to do one or the other, because once we click on close, we can't get this information again. So we need to get this information now. So either download this CSV or send an email. I'd probably recommend you download the CSV, and that will have all of that information on there. And it'll also have this sign-in URL as well. So we'll just click on that. I'm just going to download that now. And I'm just going to, now that I've downloaded that, I'll close it. Okay, so there's our user that has been set up for us. Okay, so now that we've created a user, I'm going to create a group now. And we're going to associate a policy to that group, and that will have permissions for anyone that enters that group. And then we're going to get our user, and we're going to put that user inside of that group, and then that user will inherit the permissions of that group. So let's click on Groups, create a new group. I'm going to call this Administrators. We'll click on Next Step. So now we need to attach a policy. So we can create our own policy, or we can get one ready-made, which is what we would normally do. So there's one just here, Administrator Access. That will be fine for us for administrators. We'll click on Next Step. So we can see there that we've got our group called Administrators, and we've got the policy that's going to be attached to it for Administrator Access. We'll click Create Group. Okay, so that group has been created now. So what we can do now is we can select that group. We go to Group Actions, and we can add users to that group. So we select our test user, and we add that user to our group. So now when we click on that group, I'll just go back to groups again, so we can click on this group, and we can see here the users for that group are test user, and the permissions is administrator access. So now our test user previously had no access, and now they've got administrator access. Okay, so now that we've got our user in a group, what we'll do is we'll we'll look at the password policy that we've set up for that user. So again, we'll go to users and we'll select our test user. Just click on the name there. And we're going to go to security credentials. And there we can see that we've got the console password, and we can manage our password here. So console access is enabled, and we're going to keep the existing password or use an auto-generated password. We'll use an auto-generated password. Require a password reset, and we'll put that in there as well. And so then that's how we can actually change the individual password policy for a user as such. And so when they first log in, they're going to have an auto-generated password, and they're going to have to require a password reset. So we'll click on apply. So now we can download the CSV file for that, and that will have the login details for that. So we'll just download that. And that will have the new password that has been auto-generated for this user. So we can also manage passwords at the account level as well. So what we can do is we can go to account settings over here, and we can manage our account password policy from here. And so here you can see we've got a number of options. So we can require at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, at least one number, allow users to change their own password. We can put in password expiration time. So if we wanted the password to expire in, say, 90 days, we can put that in there. So there's a lot of things that we can set up for a password policy, and that will be applied to all users of the account. And so we just click on apply password policy for that. And so that's been done there for us. Okay, so now that we've created users and groups and we've looked after passwords and password policies and all that, what we'll look at now is having roles for EC2 instances. So if we've got an application running on EC2 and we want that application to access resources within our AWS account, we need to allow that to happen. So if we want our EC2 server to, for example, access to a bucket, then we can create an IAM role that can allow that to happen. If we want our EC2 server to read CloudWatch logs, for example, then we can set that up as well. So what we'll do is we'll create an EC2 role now. So we go to roles, and here you can see it just tells you what a role is all about. And it's not only for EC2, but we can use it for IAM users in another AWS account to access our account. We can use it for federated identity through, for example, logging in with Google or Facebook, or with enterprise SAML application, all this sort of stuff. But for now, we'll just use it for an EC2 instance. So we'll click on create role. So we're going to use an AWS service, and we're going to choose the EC2 service. And that will allow our EC2 instances to call AWS services on our behalf. So we'll just select that, and then we go to permissions. So again, we need to attach a policy for this role. Just the same as we attached a policy for our group before, we need to do this for this one here. So I'm just going to search for EC2. Okay. Okay, so this one down the bottom here, which is CloudWatch Actions EC2 Access, we'll select that one. And so that will provide read-only access to CloudWatch alarms and metrics. Okay, so we click on Next Review. We'll give that a name. We won't worry about giving it a description. There's one there that's quite okay. And we can see there that we've got that that policy attached to that, which is CloudWatch Actions for EC2. And we'll click on Create Role. Okay, so I've already got a role here before, just ignore that one, but here is the role that we just created. So we can click on that and have a look at it. So there we can see we've got our policy on there, and we've also got an ARN for this role, but we won't worry too much about that. So that's all been done. and looking pretty good. So what we can do now is that we can look at creating an account alias. So if we go to the dashboard, and we can see here we've got the sign-in link, and you can see it's quite difficult to remember. The signin.aws.amazon.com/console is reasonably easy to remember, but remembering the big long account number is not so good. So what we can do is we can click on Customize, and we can give that account an alias. Okay, so I'm just going to call mine backspace-labs, but please don't call yours backspace. Call it something else that's unique for you. And I'll just click on Yes, Create. And there you can see now the sign-in link is backspace-labs.signin.aws. And so that's a lot easier for you to remember. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is show you how to get a credentials report. Now that's quite a handy thing to know all of the credentials that you've got out of there and whether they're being used or not. If you've got a large organisation, you want to be able to know that those credentials are being used. And if they're not, then get rid of them. So you can go to Credentials Report and then click on Download Report, and that credentials report will download. So when you open that up, okay, so you'll see here that we've got the user. So we've got our root account access, and we've got our test user that we created. They've got an ARN, or an Amazon resource name, and the user is created on this date. And we've got password enabled, and we can see here whether we've got multi-factor authentication active, which we don't. But in the next lab, we're going to have a look at that, creating multi-factor and implementing multi-factor authentication. And so it gives you a lot of information there around what is going on with your credentials. So that's a handy thing to have. So that finishes up for this IAM lab. Coming up next, we'll have a look at implementing multi-factor authentication on our root account, and I'll see you in that one.